The
We're live.
broadcast is live.
Hello, Tracy Pepper. I'm Hannah Judson, and my guest today is Tracy Pepper. I'm so grateful that you've got the time to set aside today to meet with me and to spend some time talking. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I've got a long list of questions to ask you, but first I just want to ask you, how are you?
I'm good. I've had my coffee. I've had my allergy medicine.
Okay.
I listen to some good music that I love to get me excited, which is something I always tell my clients to do if they're having any nerves about doing something. I always say, listen to something that will take you back to a time when you felt really good and confident. So I always do that before I have a big client or I have to do something where I'm a little like, let's see how this is going to go. So yeah.
Oh, well, so do you have a playlist, or do you just who's your go-to?
Well, you know what? I feel like my friends always say I'm stuck in 1984, which is when I was 17, and I listened to a lot of British and Scottish jangly pop artists like Lloyd Cole and the Commotions and Aztec Camera and Orange Juice and Del Amitri. But today it was Scritti Politti, Cupid and Psyche.
Oh, cool. And so how did that make you feel?
It just takes, I don't know. It's funny. 17 was not a good year. I was a teenager going to a really depressing public high school, but music was the escape. That was like the thing that made me feel really good. And like the life I was currently living was not going to be forever, that I was going to get out. And I really wanted to go to the UK. And so listening to a lot of those artists was sort of my way of dreaming about the life I was going to have when I was older. And for some reason, that music still makes me feel really peaceful and calm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like signposts on your journey, like telling you that you're not going to stay here, you're going there. So you graduated from high school, and then did you go to the UK?
Well, yes, actually, I did. I did a month-long stint in Glasgow, Scotland, which is where I wanted to go, with something called the Experiment in International Living, where they send you to live with a host family.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then after that was just a month. And then I went to college. I spent my junior year in London. And after I graduated from Tufts, I went back to Glasgow and started my career as a music journalist. That's where I launched it, actually.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that. So you started your career as a music journalist, and then you moved into editing, and then from there, much time passed, and you then got into media consulting and coaching, and now you're doing coaching and also corporate coaching or executive coaching. Is that
I call it personal coaching, mostly because life coaching has a connotation of somebody who took a weekend seminar, drank some green juice, did a lot of yoga, and now calls himself a coach. So
yeah,
I went through a year plus training program to get certified as a personal coach. But my clients are a lot of creatives and entrepreneurs and executives and artists and just people they're high performers. I would call them high performers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but getting back to the UK music scene and the influence that it had on you as you launched your career. So early on, what were some of the discoveries that you made by traveling to the UK before moving to Chicago to launch your career? What sort of discoveries did you make, not just about the music you were hearing, but about the future to come?
Well, I don't know if I had a plan beyond just meeting my favorite rock stars. Obsessed with these guys so Aztec Camera's singer was a guy named Roddy Frame. Lloyd Cole and the Commotions was Lloyd Cole. The singer of a band called Orange Juice was this guy, Edwyn Collins. All I really wanted was just to interview my favorite artists. And it was really because I was fascinated by why their music sounded the way that it did. They wrote songs that were very emotional and very intimate sounding. And for me, growing up in LA, I just felt really disconnected from my environment. And for some reason, I felt more connected to these British weirdos on the other side of the world. So I just thought, and also I knew I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a journalist, but I didn't want to just write about anything. I wanted to write about music. So that was what inspired me. Also, at the time, after I graduated from college, the music scene in Boston, the journalism scene was dominated by men. And it was pretty tough to break in as a woman into writing about music there. I was really fortunate. I had an editor in Boston. I was an intern after I graduated at Boston Rock, which was a little kind of local free fanzine. And it was run by this guy named Tristram Loza, who gave me my first real break. I would kind of bang on his door and send him letters and phone calls, and until he agreed to hire me, I'm like, you need an intern. And so he hired me as an intern and let me write, and I organized his office. And that was sort of my first thing outside of the college newspaper. I was also a record reviewer for the Tufts Observer. So that was kind of also where I started. And that was in the late 80s. So there's a lot of amazing music, De La Soul and Beastie Boys and the Proclaimers and just all these. Public Enemy, I remember their record came out around that time, and just amazing artists. So it was just literally inspired by the music I was hearing. But back in Glasgow, I went there because those were my favorite artists. And so I thought, well, that's a good place to start. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't remember.
Yeah, so we're getting a little feedback, and I think that's on my end. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, just reposition my microphone. So you were in Boston for a while. I had forgotten about that. So the Boston music scene was pretty interesting back then. It was, but I never thought about it in terms of it being dominated by men, at least the journalism aspect of it. So were you aware of that then, or did that dawn on you later?
No, I was aware of it. The music scene itself, listen, we had the Pixies and Throwing Muses, and there were a lot of amazing bands. It's funny, my whole career, I've been really lucky. All the different cities that I've lived in ended up having really thriving music scenes. Like Boston had all of those artists when I lived there. When I moved to Chicago, that was when Liz Phair and Veruca Salt and Urge Overkill and Smashing Pumpkins were all coming up. And in Glasgow, again, there are all these amazing kind of indie pop bands playing. So, and then when I was in New York working for Spin, we had the Strokes and the White Stripes and Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And I feel like in some way my career has followed that trajectory of being able to write about amazing artists at the time that they were actually
when it was happening.
Yeah.
So yeah. So if you were to move anywhere right now to continue that scene, where would you go? What city has it right now? Is it not like that anymore? Or maybe scenes
It's the internet. It's not about a city, right? Most of my clients are discovered because they write a song and put it up online, and then it goes viral. And it really doesn't matter where they live. And in some ways, that's been really democratizing for the industry, because you could be a nobody in Nebraska, but if you have talent and a great voice and a great song that connects with people, you're going to probably find some kind of audience. And a lot of record labels now, that's the way they do A&R. They look for things that are viral, that have gone big on TikTok. And, you know, the danger of it is that they're banking on this artist having more than one song. So sometimes artists find on the strength of just one song, and then there's a lot of pressure to keep it going. But I think it's leveled the playing field to some degree. There aren't as many gatekeepers to having as there used to be.
Right. All of the tools we have, you know, all of the digital tools, you have them to run your own business and, you know, to run your own career, for better and for worse.
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's a lot of the ability for an artist to move forward is your ability to navigate the tools, choose the right ones for you, figure out what they mean to you, and decide what is important, what isn't important, because there's a lot of advice out there about what you need to do, what you need to be doing. And so when your clients come to you, are they asking you, Tracy, what do I need to be doing? Is that the big concern, like needing help to sort of know what to do next?
No, not really, because I'm really seeing them. If it's a media coaching client, then I'm really just helping them with navigating their press interviews. Okay. There are people like far above my pay grade that know how to climb the ladder in the music industry. But what I tell them is about how do you show up authentically and share your story, and what kind of impact that can have on your career. Because a lot of my clients are they grew up in the social media age, so they don't necessarily see the benefit of doing press, like traditional press. And they tell me, well, what do I need to talk to Rolling Stone for when I can just talk to my fans directly on Instagram? I'll say, you're right, you can talk to your fans directly on social media, and that's an awesome platform to reach a lot of people. But with social media, you're really only talking to people who've already heard of you.
Right.
If you speak to the press, then you are opening up the possibility of people who don't know who you are learning who you are. And that's why I think doing press is still a valuable piece of growing yourself as an artist. Although I'm sure there are a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds who would disagree with me because they're like, why do I have to do this for? Ugh. So what I say is, if you were to be more comfortable and confident doing this, would you be more open to it? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What if we could get you there? And then they become a little bit more. And most of it is fear or anxiety. And I completely understand that. They just, they're saying they're apathetic or they don't want to do it because it's boring or it's stupid or it's not useful. But I try to see underneath that as to what's really going on.
Right. So showing up authentically and telling your story isn't something that you do once. It's not like a show you put on one time. It's something you have to just sort of do, and you do it in multiple ways in different circumstances. So how do you help your clients, or what do you say to them in terms of sort of the longevity of their story and their authenticity?
Well, so there's a couple things that come to mind when you ask me that. One is, how do you keep it fresh when you're telling it over and over and over again?
Yeah.
Is one thing they face. They say, it's not that I don't want to tell my story. It's just I'm asked the same things over and over again. And it's hard to pretend like this is the first time I'm telling it, which that's true. So there's that challenge. And what I always say about that is two things. One, it's your story. If you can look at an interview more as, it's not an egoic exercise. It isn't about, I'm so great, look at me. It's about an act of service to the audience. If you're willing to be vulnerable and you're willing to share with people who you are and what you care about, where are you going to be inspiring people? Maybe somebody is thinking, oh, maybe they live in a small town and they're looking for how to get out. Where is your story going to perhaps inspire them to take a risk somewhere that they wouldn't have taken? So if you see interviews from that perspective, then it becomes a different animal. It's not just you, blah, 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 I'm so this, I'm so that. And it's more about, okay, can what I have to say perhaps help somebody? And also feeding off the energy of the journalist. If it's a different journalist, there's going to be a different energy to the conversation.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of my clients complain really about the questions. Well, the questions are not interesting. And sure, that's true. We can't control the questions. So my suggestion there is, well, where are you matching poor questions with poor answers? Where if a journalist asks you a question that isn't that interesting, where can you expand and make that answer better than what the question was?
Yes.
We don't have any control over the questions. The only thing we have control over is how you show up to answer them.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it puts the accountability on the artist instead of on the journalist, because you can't rely on the journalist to ask you interesting questions. They may not. We don't know.
Right. And a question is really an open door. A question is a starting point for, usually a journalist isn't looking for a specific answer. They're looking for the conversation to arrive somewhere. Wouldn't you say they're looking for something to happen? I
always say the question is an invitation. It's not a question like you have to stay in the linear tunnel of whatever it is they're asking you. It's a suggestion or an offering, an invitation to speak about something that you care about, that lights you up, that's going to make you excited to talk about. So one of the first things I always do with a client is I say, what do you want people to know about you? What are you excited talking about? And then regardless of what the questions are, can you steer to that subject?
Yeah.
Then your interview is going to be more grounded. It's going to be more purposeful and have more meaning. And then you're going to be more excited. The reporter is definitely going to feel that energy, and that's going to be transmitted to the audience as well.
Yeah. So what would you want people to know about you? So if I asked you a really stupid question, you're like, okay, I need to pivot this question. What would you want people to understand?
I think, I don't know if I need them to know anything about me personally. I think it's more about what I want people to know is possible from sharing your story and communicating publicly.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm interested in.
What I love about your story is that you started out as a music journalist from a position of passion for your job and passion for the music and the whole scene. You loved the whole scene. And I have a memory of you. I don't know what year it was, but it was from a while ago in Chicago, Illinois, at the Empty Bottle, holding a pad of paper and a pen. And you were there to cover Loud Lucy. I ran into you, and Loud Lucy was on stage, and you were jotting notes in your pad of paper, and I thought of that scene, and I just thought, wow, the world has changed, especially this year, no live gigs. But I was going to ask you, do people still jot in pads of paper? Do journalists still go to shows and really write sort of live commentary on shows, or are they just listening to Spotify and writing from that?
I mean, I think when live shows were still happening, yeah, I think people were going. And listen, this is the thing. I haven't actually been a music journalist in a journalistic capacity for a really long time. Just brief overview of my career, went from music journalism to editing because I moved. So, we should also back up into how I know you. Right? So I know Hannah because she was roommates with a good friend of mine at Northwestern University, where I went to graduate school. I did a master's in journalism at the Medill School of Journalism. So that's how we met. And Hannah was a musician. And so we were always out and about, same clubs. I was out all the time when you hear local bands and writing about local bands. And so that was in Chicago. And then I moved to New York. I started to get freelance assignments with big magazines in New York. And I thought, you really are going to have to go there. So I moved there, and I was there for 10 years. And I started as a assistant at the New York Observer, back when it was edited by the legendary editor, Peter Kaplan. And then I was being an assistant there. My job was to get all of the copy in from all the different editors. And it was writers like Candace Bushnell and trying to think, Rex Reed, and my job was to harass Nikki Fink who started Deadline. My job was to harass them into filing their copy, to call them and yell at them until they did. So I started there, and then I got a job at Interview Magazine working with Ingrid Sishi for a year, and then I got my dream job at Spin.
Yeah.
And I was there for 7 years editing profiles and features and the front of the book coverage, and worked with incredible writers like Chuck Klosterman and Mark Spitz and Lizzie Goodman and Andy Greenwald and just phenomenal writers. And so I was there until, when did I leave? 2004. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, that's kind of the overview of how it happened. But we were talking about Chicago.
Yeah, I was talking about being at the Empty Bottle, which is
bottle. Yeah. So do people still? I don't know. I hope so. I mean,
yeah.
I never considered myself a critic. I think back then I was probably for Loud Lucy, who were a local Chicago band. I just wrote about bands that I liked, that I thought were doing something interesting, and I worked for what was it called? Oh, The Third Word. It was just a little boutique magazine that some friends of mine and I were putting out. But I wasn't a critic. I was more of a profile feature writer. I always have been. I'm not a music critic. Can't come up with a lot of fancy words to describe music. I'm never going to be able to describe it better than if somebody just goes and listens to it. So, but I was always interested in, who is the human making the music? Yeah. Who are they? What do they care about? What inspires them to get up every day and do this? And what kind of impact do they want to have on the world? And I've been curious about that since I was a teenager.
I think it's so interesting what you just said. Every word applies to coaching. Yeah. Having that kind of interest in the person. It's not, the interest is, and I think, so that is probably one of your superpowers, is that particular interest and ability to zero in on who somebody is, not just what they're doing.
Well, I always say being a coach isn't that far off from being a journalist. You have to have a relentless curiosity, and you have to, and just to be able to kind of use your intuition to hear not only what they're saying, and kind of zero in on that, but what are they not saying? What is the subtext behind the thing that they're not saying? And as a coach, I'm often trying to help them see things that they don't see. And so I'm naming things that they don't see that might be blocking them or might be in their way, whether it's in a media coaching perspective, it's about where are they nervous or shut down around stepping boldly into a public space. And in my personal coaching practice, it's where are they playing small in their life. So to me, they're not that separate. The one thing I tell every media coaching client I have right out of the gate is you cannot separate how you show up to speak publicly from how you feel about yourself. If you are not feeling internally good about yourself in this opportunity, that is going to impact how you show up to speak publicly. So that's where I zero in and like to work on.
And so do you give exercises? Are there specifics that people can do to tap into maybe identifying, maybe if they have nervousness, putting it aside or anything like that?
I don't know if I have exercises you could do on your own. That's the work I do in the session, is trying to uncover self-limiting beliefs. I do have some suggestions for calming nerves before, speaking. Things like I said at the beginning, listening to music that you love, or perhaps it's even having a conversation with somebody that is super supportive. And it's anything but trying to memorize some notes or answers, perfect answers. People think that doing an interview is about, they have to have the questions in advance, they have to prepare them, they have to be over prepared. And I just think that actually is not the most effective way, because if you forget what you worked on, then you have a panicked moment. And so I think it's more likely that if you can trust yourself, that if you're grounded in your purpose and what you're doing there, and you have intention around why am I showing up for this opportunity, the words are going to be there. And I know that because it's worked for me. I'm not saying don't have no preparation. I don't think winging it entirely is a great idea. Like if you're prepping for a big presentation or meeting, you want to roll the phrases around in your mouth a little bit and kind of think through, okay, what's the structure of what I want to say? But mostly it's about identifying, what do I want the takeaway from this opportunity to be? And being intentional about that when you walk in, just sort of kind of meditating on it. Like, what am I here for? What do they need to get out of it? What do I need to get out of it? And that I think elevates the quality of everything that you say.
And it allows you to sort of stay in the moment and not get ahead of yourself or behind. You're in the moment dealing with what's actually happening.
You're reacting to the thing. Like if you and I didn't have a conversation about what we were going to talk about, you sent me a couple of things like, oh, I want to talk to you about your creative journey. And I could have neurotically prepared, how do I tell my story in 30 seconds? And I thought, don't do that. You wouldn't tell your clients to do that. So, I just try to listen and know, I have enough technique now that I can navigate things. And there are techniques that I teach my clients. It's not just show up and good luck. There are things that I suggest you do, but they're not what you would think. It's not like you have to know all your answers in advance, which means you have to see the questions, because they really are, a lot of people are obsessed with having the questions in advance. And not only will a lot of reputable journalistic outlets not go for that, but I would rather you build confidence to know that you can handle anything that's coming, whether it's deflecting an unwanted question as well. I get asked that all the time. How do I deal with a question that I don't want to answer? So,
How do you deal with a question you don't want to answer? Is that insider information? People have to book a session with you.
Well, it's funny. I posted about this recently on my Instagram feed because I was so appalled at the vice presidential debate and how one candidate in particular, mostly, did not answer any of the questions. And I just was really struck by how that is a very antiquated mode of doing a interview. Maybe it's different in a debate. I'm not a political consultant, but I just know that if you're asked a direct question and the question is important, like especially in politics where millions of people's lives depend on these topics, and you're just avoiding it, then you really are undermining the public's trust in you. And so I'm always looking for, what can I say? A lot of traditional media training is about steering to what you can. It's steering away from what you can't say and what you can, but it's avoiding things flat out, like answering the question that you want to answer. And I get that, but I wonder if there is a better way, which is to acknowledge when something is challenging, acknowledge when it's like, yeah, gosh, that's an intense question. I'm not sure I have an answer for you right at the moment, or just naming it. Or that's a complicated issue that I think it's hard to really address properly in a 30-second answer. Because then at least you're telling the audience that this is going to be tough, but just answering something else, I find I just think it really makes the audience not trust you anymore.
It does not build trust at all. Yeah, I agree. It seems to me that a lot of the old-timer politicians have gone to the school of bombarding quickly with your message, no matter what the question is.
Yeah.
And to never say something is complicated, and to never say you don't have the full answer. I think that people in the spotlight, that there are a lot of people who believe that is true. And so maybe we might need like another generation of people to come up to that accept more complexities and accept longer answers.
Well, then the speakers are one side of the equation, but then the media has to be on board with that too. And if media are really only concerned with short answers and gotcha journalism and clickbait, then nothing's going to change, because a lot of times people who are being interviewed are adapting to what the rules that they know they have to follow by the way media has been structured. And I think the rise of podcasts is actually a really promising development in how popular they are, because it enables people to have a long form conversation and to be able to get into issues in a real way versus just trying to reduce them down to something that sounds good that can be said on Twitter. Right. So, and like, I'm not somebody, I think there's a lot of value in new media and young people's energy and harnessing the power of that. So it's just more like, is there also space for something for us to also have more thoughtful and engaging conversations where issues aren't reduced to their basic simplicity,
Yeah. It seems to me that definitely people like to listen to conversations, and people are open to complexity and answers, but it is the current format that we have. That there's also right now, more than ever, responsibility on the individual to find the media they want to consume. Like, you are really responsible for choosing and making choices as to what's going to inform you. And in the olden days, I remember your parents watched the news. It was ABC, CBS, NBC, one or the other. And the news was all delivered in a very similar format. So no matter what you personally believed, you're still receiving the same news as everybody else.
Yeah.
That is completely not what's happening anymore. So we have all these individual channels of people receiving information based on choices they've made.
That's true. Well, and also they're getting their news from social media and what their friends post, and if they trust their friend, then they're going to trust that news source that they post. So it's an interesting landscape. One of the things I notice a lot, because I sit with people who are being interviewed and I know what their complaints are, and at least in the music space, what they get annoyed with is, well, they're not really asking questions. They're saying, like, tell us about your new EP.
Yeah.
Which is true. It's not a great question. It's like, well, what do you want to know about it? And they'll say to me, how do I handle a question that's so broad like that? And I said, well, we can't change the question. It is what it is. But you get to decide, okay, what do I want to bring to that answer? So is it the themes of the music? Is it the sound of the music? Is it the way you want people to feel when they hear it? But the onus is now really on the artist to decide what is important and what they want to talk about, and not rely on a reporter asking them a great question. It just might not happen.
Yeah, exactly.
I hear a lot of, I've been watching a lot of Zoom interviews lately because I have to when I'm prepping. I do a lot of research on each of my clients. I want to know what they've already said to the press before we get on our call. And I notice that a lot of these outlets, they'll say, talk about blah, blah, blah. And I just sit there and think, the art of interviewing even has really been lost. And so no wonder my clients are bored, because it's just, you could be anybody. It's just take the next celebrity and put them in the hot seat and ask them the same thing. And doesn't seem to be a real interest in who this artist is. So I think it works both ways. Artists also need to not just kind of be in receiving mode when they show up to an interview. You can't just sit back and say, ask me a great question. Because again, I keep saying this, that might not happen. So what do you bring to it? What do you show up with? What is your part in this? How do you make this interview great?
Yeah.
You want to think about, how can I be more interesting?
Yeah. So if you were me, what would you ask you next?
Oh, you're gonna make me work. Let's see. Probably more, maybe more about coaching, I guess.
Yeah. So coaching is such a big thing now, and it has evolved. Many people have become coaches. And I think that you are a specialty coach, and what you bring to it is your expertise and your years of, you didn't, as you said, you didn't go to like a weekend seminar and become a coach. You really have been working towards this, what you bring and how you work with your clients. So why do you think that coaching specifically has become so big in the past years?
Well, if we're talking about personal coaching, I think it's because people maybe don't want to do therapy. So I can talk a little bit about the difference in my mind between therapy and coaching. And by the way, I'm a believer in both. Yeah. I've had both, and this is not to diminish the impact of therapy at all, because therapy, if you're a survivor of trauma, or if you're somebody who hasn't examined patterns of behavior and childhood of origin issues, then I think that's an extremely valuable thing. Coaching is more if you've already done a lot of that work. Mm-hmm. So coaching, we don't necessarily dig that deep into the past. It's more about focusing on, where are you in your life right now, in the present, and what do you want to dream up for your future? Mm-hmm. And that's just very resonant for people. So we get to look at, there's 3 principles of the type of coaching that I do, 3 areas I work in. One is fulfillment, which is about, how do you create and dream up this life that you want? What's getting in the way of that? And then the second one is balance, which is, how do you see challenges from different perspectives? If you're seeing something from a limited perspective, where can you shift that and see it a different way? And that might enable you to make different, more resonant choices. And then process, which is, if you are sitting with some really big feelings about something, how can you just be with those feelings and allow them to be present and to pass through, so that you can move on to whatever it is you're dreaming up? So that's where I see coaching, and why I think it's really become something so valuable for people. I've had a coach since April 2019. That's how I decided I wanted to be trained in this kind of work and not just do media, and also because for many years I was seeing clients come to me with issues beyond, how do I survive this interview with Good Morning America? What I was witnessing was, they're having trouble with the interview with Good Morning America because they don't feel good about themselves. And so I thought, if I could get some tools to help people see where they were playing small, see where they had limiting beliefs and voices telling them, well, why does anyone want to listen to you anyway? It was so much negativity and things that they were telling themselves. I thought, if we could clear that, what becomes possible from there? And that was why I went into the training. And also, coaching just phenomenally changed my life, just huge, fundamentally changed it.
So is the first step, when you're looking at when you're discovering the things that are blocking you, or the thought bubbles, or whatever, the rocks in your pocket, whatever metaphor that you use, is the first step becoming aware of them?
Yes. So I call it the 3 A's. And I don't know where I heard this from. I'm pretty sure I didn't make it up. I might have gotten it from somewhere, but the first step is being aware. What are the voices telling you? Are they telling you, why does anyone want to listen to you? You're not good at this. You're talking too much. That kind of stuff. So you get to observe that when it happens. And you get to say, okay, I see you. I get it. You have an opinion, and ask it to step back. And there's a lot of work I do around that. It's not quite that simple. Sometimes those voices are so persistent, but I have a lot of tools I use in my sessions to help people deal with those. So that's the first A. And then the second one is acceptance, is having some compassion for yourself. These voices didn't just start. They've probably been with you since you were little. Yeah. And so having some acceptance and kindness and compassion for yourself, that it's okay. And you're not a terrible person because you are dealing with these feelings. So that's the second thing. And then the third one is action. Is okay, now I'm aware of it. Now I've decided that I can accept myself in either way. And then third is, what do I want to do differently? How do I want to show up? Do I want to stay in this negative mindset, or do I want to try to see this from a different perspective? So it's awareness, acceptance, and action.
Cool. Yeah, as you were saying that, I was thinking, what's so great about that is that there's room for everybody to improve, and not improve just to improve, but to become a better version of yourself. Like, everybody can. So that's really optimistic.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a good way to look at it. To me, it's not about self-improvement. It's about self-acceptance.
Okay. All right.
Start that place. There's nothing wrong with you. Like the coaching that I do, we assume that our clients are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. Mm-hmm. No one's broken. We're not there to fix anybody. We're not there to solve anybody's problem. We're there I coach, we always say this in my training, we coach the person, not the problem. Mm-hmm. Because if people are stuck in that mindset of, I have this huge problem, when I feel myself trying to solve a client's problem, then I have to really take a step back and say, where can I just get more curious? Yeah. Instead of I know exactly what I think you should do. Because that's not coaching, that's advice giving. Right. And I'm also a consultant. There are times where I'm hired to solve a problem, but even that, I still approach it from a coaching lens. I think you'll solve problems by getting curious about why the problem exists.
Right. Exactly. And so it is the client's responsibility to show up and to work through their awareness and acceptance and action.
Yeah, but that's not easy to do on their own. So what I'm there to do is facilitate that happening. Yeah. And I do that by naming what I see, by asking powerful questions, and by creating action plans. And the thing I always ask in every session is, what do you want? Not what do you think you can have, but what do you want? Because most people stop at, well, I want this, but I can't have it because of these 10 reasons. So I try to investigate that. Why do they think they can't have it? And what's actually true about that? Is it true? Because most likely it's not true. It's just there's a voice telling them that, well, you can't have that because of blah, blah, blah. So. Yeah.
I think that is a really, really difficult question to answer. If you just ask yourself what you really want. Well, I'm happy with everything. I'm so happy with everything exactly the way it is.
I'm always struck by how often a client will say, they'll knee-jerk say, I don't know. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to ask you again. I want you to take a breath. I'm going to ask you again. And this time, you're not allowed to say, I don't know. I want you to just sit and do not open your mouth until you have an idea. And then sometimes they start to cry because they realize that they're so blocked from even believing they can have the life that they want and the things that they want are even possible. Yeah. And it's I get emotional even thinking about that. I had a session with my own coach who asked me that, and I was like, bah! So and I've been at this for a long time, but I think constantly examining where are you not stepping into what you want And if we can't do it alone, a lot of us can't do it alone. That's where a coach comes in. If they're good, but you don't want a coach to tell you, you want this. That's why coaching is different than going to your friend and for advice, you know?
Yeah. That they will be with you through the process. So you mentioned that you go to a coach. Is that like a lifelong thing that you will work with a coach, or do you go to a coach in different seasons? Is it a seasonal thing?
For me, I've been ongoing since April 2019. Right. I came to it because I was at a real dark place in my life. I had 3 friends pass away within a year. I think it was a year, and they were all around my age. And I started to become very, very aware of how I did not want to waste my life, that my friends' lives were cut short. And so in order to honor them, I wanted to make sure that I was living my life as fully as I possibly could. And I had been media coaching at that point for 10 years. And I just knew that there was more that I could be doing.
Yeah.
Not only professionally, but also personally. And so I hired my coach to help me figure out what was next.
Yeah. Excellent. Wow.
Yeah. So that's why I believe in it so strongly, and why I'm such an advocate for it, because, and that's the thing with me too, is everything that I ask my clients to do, I ask myself to do as well, which is another reason I said yes to this opportunity, because like I said to you, it connects me with what does it feel like to be vulnerable and to speak publicly and tell your story. This isn't something I normally do and haven't done. And I'm usually more comfortable being the one asking the questions and answering them. But I think you show up because A, how can I be of service? And B, this connects me with what my clients deal with. And if I'm going to ask them to show up and do it, then I need to be willing to do it as well.
Yep. Very good. It's kind of funny because I enjoy these conversations so much. And I usually am talking to people that I know pretty well, or more or less. But I have to say, I've been like a little bit nervous with talking to you, Tracy. So like you are an expert in this, and that we're talking about questions, and I'm like formulating the next question, but I should be asking.
So that's a thing that people do.
Go ahead.
So if I want to give people a tip, one of the things is, so in coactive coaching, there's 3 levels of listening. And I can talk about these briefly. Level 1 is when you're listening to somebody, but you're just waiting for your turn to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not really present, because all you're thinking about is, okay, what's my next question? So level 2 is when you're just in the flow. You're just totally focused on the other person. You're not worried about what they think of you. You're not worried about the audience thinks of you. You're just present. And then level 3 is where you have a little bit of ambient kind of awareness of what's going on. That, like for me, translating that to an interview, I tell a client, level 3 is when you're totally present and you're listening to the question, but you're also thinking, oh, I haven't talked about this yet. I'd love to bring that in. But it's still coming from a positive place. Whereas level 1 is like, you're thinking, was that answer good? Am I talking too much? Did I go on too long? So it's just, again, it's about having awareness. Where am I drip falling back into level 1, and can I get myself back into level 2? In coaching, we call that self-management. If I'm listening to a client and they're telling me a story and I'm worrying about what my next question is, I'm in level 1.
Yeah.
Where if I'm just present and listening and totally there for them, then my words are going to come. They're going to be there, and I don't have to control it or manage it or worry about it. But it takes practice, for sure.
For sure. So that's so interesting. Level 1, 2, and 3, definitely those are slightly different parts of your brain.
Yeah.
It's happening in different parts of your brain. And I think that it relates a little bit to stage fright, like getting on stage. And when you are worried about the whole set, one thing I always remind myself is that I don't need to know the whole set. I need to know the note I'm on.
Yeah.
So go and do the one note and take it from there.
That's great.
Yeah, that's one of my little tricks of the trade. Another thing that I've learned over the years is that the opposite of fear is love, and that if you're in one state, you can't be in the other state. And so one thing that I've done over the years when I'm dealing with stage fright is to just think of somebody I love. And it usually just flips the whole thing around to change I think you're changing your brain chemistry, and you're changing your state, really.
Well, it's funny. So there is actually neuroscience that backs up what you just said. I just completed a 7-week coach training in something called positive intelligence, which was started by this amazing C-suite coach named Shirzad Chamine, and his philosophy, and it's backed up by research. He spoke to thousands, and I think it's like, I don't know, 10,000 high performers, because he coaches executives and people really high achievers. That what you're talking about is the saboteur brain versus the sage brain. The saboteur brain is the fearful part, the one that's telling you all of these negative stories. And what he teaches is how do we weaken that part of our brain and develop our sage brain, which is the 5 powers of the sage. I believe he said are empathy, exploration, innovation, navigation, and activation. Okay. And he takes us all through how do you connect with that part of your brain. So what you're saying is actually, they've proven it in doing MRIs of people's brain and seeing we have these neural pathways that we create since we were little that tell us all these stories. They're just things, they're coping mechanisms that spring up in childhood. Right. And once we become aware of them and where they're running us, if you can allow that to recede and step into these more exploration, curiosity, compassion, and empathy qualities, then you're going to show up differently. You're going to respond to everything differently. So I've taken that work as well, that the course is you do it for yourself, and that way you can share it with your clients. And I thought it was fascinating. And I've been sharing it with a lot of my clients, and they've really been amazed at the awareness that they've gotten around when they're part of them is telling them a story. And that isn't true.
It was amazing to be aware of your own brain and to be able to say no thank you to certain things, and to tell it what it's going to do. Actually, we're not going to go down that path, or the response today is not going to be this. It's going to be something else. You really can set you can speak to your thinking.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I do. I spend time with these parts of myself that are, because the chances are they're very young. They're developed in childhood, and Shirzad talks about this, that these are coping mechanisms that we develop in childhood, because children our brains are wired to assess threats, because we're basically powerless and vulnerable when we're kids. We're at the mercy of adults. So if you had a upbringing that had trauma or had challenges in it, then you've probably developed coping mechanisms like people pleasing, or avoiding, or hyperachieving, or being hyper rational, or being a controller, controlling a lot of things. Those are all saboteurs that he's named. Mm-hmm. And we all have what he calls the judge, which is that relentless inner critic telling us why everything is wrong and bad and why you're bad. And the problem becomes when you don't become aware of that voice and you carry that coping mechanism into adulthood, when we really are meant to develop adult coping mechanisms for dealing with challenges, which reside in the sage part of the brain, which is problem solving and navigating and exploration and innovating. But if you're still holding on to the ones you did when you were 5, then imagine you're showing up to your relationships as a little one, as a 5-year-old.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. That definitely what used to serve you doesn't necessarily serve you in the present, and certainly things that served you in childhood keep you in that child mode. That's interesting.
There are a lot of different modalities that examine this phenomenon. There's a type of therapy that is phenomenal for this. It's called internal family systems, IFS. That is terrific at looking at these parts of ourselves. Positive intelligence for business. They call it PQ, mental fitness, amazing. There's a podcast that I follow. This woman, her name's Michelle Chalfant. She's a therapist and a meditation teacher, and she has a podcast called The Adult Chair. And she talks about when you're sitting in your child, your adolescent, and your adult chair. That's very simple and easy to follow. And I just absorb all of it, And again, at first I have to see how is this impacting me, and using it to apply to my own life, and then trying to share bits of it that I've learned with others. But I don't take any credit for these ideas. This is all stuff that I've learned as a coach.
So you've been on a journey of like learning and sort of going from one idea to the next, or one fascination to the next thing. Do you have time for writing anymore?
The only writing I really do is on my Instagram. So no, I've retired from music writing. I was doing bios up until probably a year and a half ago. I was still interviewing artists and writing publicity bios, but it just became too time consuming. And what I really wanted to do was just declare myself, I am a full-time coach. This is all I do.
Yeah.
I do love to write, but I find that it's limited now to, if I have an idea for something, then I'll post about it on my Instagram, which is Tracy Pepper Coaching, if anyone wants to follow it. So, but I don't write, like, I don't do journalism anymore or any kind of copywriting.
So do you think that you would ever return to it in another format? That, like, all of, I'm putting your Instagram and your website in our chat area if anyone wants to. But it seems like you're gathering and learning. Will it have an outlet through writing, or you're just like, you don't need to do that anymore?
I'm not opposed to it. It's funny, over the years, a lot of people have said, why don't you write a book? Why don't you write a book? And I don't want to physically sit down and write a book.
Yeah.
Like, fulfillment for me is, what do I want to wake up every day and do? And what I want to wake up every day and do is not sit by myself behind a computer. I want to coach people.
Yeah.
I want to interact. I want to have conversations with people. I want to help them create change and transformation in their life. And so if I'm going to hold to my own fulfillment, then it isn't about, that doesn't speak to me in the same way. I'm grateful that I have the ability to do it.
Yeah.
And being talked into doing a public Instagram was a huge ordeal. I had people say to me, you have so much to share. You should write. And okay, so that's my concession to it. So I started this and I post sporadically. I probably should post more, but I do it when I'm inspired and when I have something.
That is the best way to post anything, or to produce anything, is when you're really in the moment and it comes naturally. But just to say, your Instagram account is great. I love reading it. You post ideas of importance. You talk about your own personal journey. Your writing is excellent. And it's like, really, like, I always look forward to when you do post. So you shouldn't be saying you should post more. So anyway.
Well, to me, again, it's pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And it's an exercise in vulnerability. It is not comfortable for me to share my own story in certain ways. Yeah. I'm happy talking about my career, but it's unfamiliar to me, but that's why. And I tell clients this too. I said, whatever it is that you're scared of, walk towards that, because that's where the growth is going to be. I'll share another story with you. Last year, no, was it earlier? No, it was last year. I started doing public speaking training because I had friends saying, you should do public speaking and you should do this. And I was like, ooh. And so I hired these two coaches, and just the universe really brought me two coaches that were very like-minded. Again, they worked from the inside out. It was very holistic, not over preparing. And I'll give them a shout out. Their company is called Ultra Speaking, and they are phenomenal. And what they taught me was that if you trust and believe that you have the ability to do this, it will be there. The words will be there. And they put me through this one exercise that really drove this concept home for me. They said, okay, Tracy, here's your topic. You have 5 minutes to write down some ideas and kind of prepare for it. And then you're going to get up there and present. So I got up there. I had 5 minutes. I was like, oh, great. Okay. And I wrote down what I wanted to say, a few ideas, and I got up there and did it. And then they said, okay, new topic. Here's your topic. Get up there and go. And I didn't have any time to prepare. And they filmed me doing both of them. And afterwards, it became really clear that the second one, where I had no time to prepare, was better. It was stronger.
Oh,
and I would never have believed it if I hadn't experienced it myself. So once again, I'm kind of caught between, I do think some preparation is really, really helpful. And so I always ask my client, I say, is it helpful for you to think through a couple of ideas? And if they say yes, then great. Then we try to come up with those ideas. And if they say, you know what, I'm just going to get out there and try, then I try to support them around that. because all my sessions are custom to each individual I'm working with. But for me personally, I'm somewhere in the middle. I still like to have some idea, but I now know that if I overthink it and I over prepare it, that it's probably not going to be as powerful as it would be if I just showed up.
Yeah. I think of it in terms of like rehearsing your instrument, practicing your instrument, practicing your music.
Yeah.
When you rehearse, you have to rehearse. You have to put the time in. And it is a very specific thing. You can't mindlessly rehearse. You have to take things apart, do them again and again and again. And it's definitely a different part of your brain. But when you show up to perform, you can't be rehearsing.
Yes, that's a great analogy.
So whether your rehearsals, whether you got a lot in or a few in, or they went this way or they went that way, in a performance, you have to start with the first note and take it from there.
I love that. I'm going to steal that from you because I'm working with so many musicians. So, and some of them, they do want to practice. Like I will throw questions at them, but I always tell them, don't memorize these answers.
Yeah.
Just feel into, it's more about what's the energy that you're showing up with? Are you connected to yourself? Are your saboteurs at bay? Are you ask them all to step back? Are you showing up in sage energy and looking at the interview as an act of service? Are you grounded to your purpose and your values? How can you communicate and see this as an opportunity to share a bit about who you are in the hopes that will have some kind of impact on somebody else?
What you were just describing reminds me of great jazz. Great jazz, where I mean, when every member is totally present with what is actually happening in that moment, and they can pass back and forth these riffs, and it's actually happening in the moment.
I love that. Or improv. It's sort of like improv. But even great improvers have a lot of training.
Exactly.
Right. So I don't want anyone to think I'm just saying, get out there and wing it. Like there is technique, and my sessions start with technique. What makes a great answer? Yeah. That's something that I coach around, because I hear a lot of generic answers. I hear a lot of answers that I think could come out of the mouth of any artist who's been asked that question. So we really try to dig deep into what makes my client unique, and there's technique that's involved in that. So and then also they do need confidence in terms of, sometimes reporters do ask questions that aren't appropriate for them to answer. So I do want them to have tools to navigate that. And I do want them to understand like how much time you're given an interview really matters. How long should your answer be? When are you rambling? When are you saying things that aren't going to be of use to the audience? Knowing what type of interview you're walking into. There's a container for it. It's kind of like what I would say as an editor when I worked at Spin. I taught a lot of young editors how to be journalists. I mean, not editors, writers. Yeah. They would show up with an amazing voice and a ton of energy, but there was no structure or container to it. Yeah. My favorite example was my friend, the late Mark Spitz, who was one of the best music journalists alive. And when I met him, he was just all energy and personality and like voice and attitude, but he didn't know how to structure anything. He didn't know, you gotta put a period at the end of the sentence. You gotta have like we call it a nut graph in journalism, where there's kind of like a paragraph up at the beginning that tells you, it's going to kind of a roadmap for the rest of the story. Why am I reading this? And he didn't know how to do that. So I taught him how to do that. So it's the same thing with my clients. It's like, you got to know the rules in order to break them, I guess.
For sure. Yeah. Nice. Sort of like, yeah, that's definitely something that you learn in art school for sure. It's like people often who don't study art will look at a Picasso, or they'll look at a Jackson Pollock and they'll say, I can do that.
No, they can't.
There's no way you can't, and you can't for multitudes of reasons. And it's not just about paint. Yeah. So it's about brain stuff. It's about being in a different moment in the space where you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Tracy, we've got just a couple more minutes. Anybody who's here live, if you've got any questions for Tracy or comments, please put them in the comments area. We've got just a couple minutes. We can respond to those.
Are there people here live? I can't tell.
So people have been popping in and out the whole time. Exactly. So well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been really fun for me.
It's been fun for me too. And I think it's been a good like I said, a good reminder of, oh, this is what my clients go through. So
yeah. So the empathy part of your brain is activated.
Yes.
Very good. Well, that's terrific. I'm glad to have been of service for that. So if you are still listening to this live cast, please do check out TracyPepper.com and Tracy on Instagram, Tracy Pepper Coaching, and follow her there. And any final words?
Final words. Just thank you for being interested in coaching and allowing me to give people a better definition of what it is. I would say I'm very evangelical about the power of it, and kind of wrestling it away from this idea that it's about advice giving or problem solving, and really more about stepping into all the answers are within you. But if you have a great coach who can walk alongside you and pull that out of you, that what becomes possible for your life is limitless.
I love that. That is beautiful. And that's a great way to end this conversation today. So thank you so much. Thank you guys for dropping in. And we'll see you at the next live chat, whenever that is.
Thanks, Hannah. Bye, everybody.